Charleston's slave markets process thousands of transactions annually, yet only once did the city's auctioneers attach written warnings to a man's bill of sale before they would sell him. Preserved in a private collection until 1987, the document details a 28-year-old field hand whose previous 3 owners had all died under circumstances the Charleston Constabulary chose not to investigate further. This man's danger did not stem from violence or rebellion, the two things plantation society feared most. It was something the authorities could not name. Something that made seasoned slave traders cross themselves and murmur about judgment. The auction house required every potential buyer to sign an acknowledgement of the risks, though the document never specified what those risks truly were. 7 men bid on him that day. Only one finalized the purchase. Before we proceed with what happened to the buyer who ignored every warning, I need you to do something important. Hit that subscribe button right now, because stories like this, the ones buried in courthouse basements and family archives, are what this channel is all about. And leave a comment telling me which state you're listening from. I want to know how far these forgotten American mysteries are reaching. Now, let's uncover why Charleston's most experienced slave dealers called this sale the gravest mistake they ever saw. The transaction occurred on March 14, 1843, at Ryan's Mart on Chalmers Street, one of Charleston's most active auction houses. The building still stands today, though few tourists comprehend what transpired within its walls. Ryan specialized in what were termed prime field hands, young men with strong backs capable of working dawn to dusk in the rice plantations that made the Carolina Lowcountry one of America's wealthiest regions. March was peak buying season. Planters needed workers ready for spring planting, and Ryan's Mart held auctions 3 times weekly to meet demand. The men who arrived in chains that morning bore no name in the auction catalog. The ledger listed him only as Subject 41, male, estimated 28 years, origin Virginia. This was not unusual. Many enslaved people arrived at Charleston's market stripped of names, histories, families, everything except the bodies that could be sold. But the auction clerk had added something irregular to his entry, a red ink notation reading, "Special conditions apply. See manager before bidding." Thomas Yancey stood at the back of the auction room that morning, observing the proceedings with the careful attention of a man who had built his fortune by knowing precisely what he was buying. At 46, Yancey owned Belmont Plantation, 4,000 acres of prime rice land 20 miles north of Charleston along the Cooper River. He had built his wealth gradually, purchasing smaller properties and consolidating them, earning a reputation as a cautious manager who rarely lost money and never lost control. His neighbors respected him. His workers feared him as they feared all masters, no more and no less. Yancey had attended Ryan's auctions for 2 decades. He could assess a man's worth in seconds, reading strength in shoulder width, endurance in calloused hands, and potential problems in the eyes. He had come that morning seeking 3 prime field hands to replace workers sold at a profit the previous season. He had not come looking for mysteries or bargains that seemed too good to be true. The morning auction proceeded normally through the first 17 lots. Men and women stood on the platform while buyers examined teeth, checked for whip scars that might indicate rebellion, and asked routine questions about age and experience. Prices were typical for the season. Prime men fetched between $900 and $1,200. Women slightly less, children priced by potential. Then the auctioneer called Lot 18, and the atmosphere in Ryan's Mart shifted. 2 handlers brought the men onto the platform, and Thomas Yancey noticed immediately that they kept their distance, standing an arm's length farther back than with other lots. The enslaved man himself stood motionless at the platform's center, hands shackled before him, leg irons forcing a shortened stance. He was tall, perhaps 6 feet, with the broad shoulders and scarred hands of a lifetime of hard labor. His face held no expression whatsoever, and this made Yancey lean forward with interest. Most men on auction platforms showed something: fear, resignation, anger carefully masked, despair. This man showed nothing. His eyes moved across the crowd with the mild interest one might show watching clouds drift. When the auctioneer began his pitch, the enslaved man's gaze settled on a point above the buyers' heads and remained there, unmoving, barely blinking. Lot 18, the auctioneer announced, his voice carrying practiced enthusiasm. Prime field hand, approximately 28 years of age, originating from Virginia Piedmont. Strong constitution, no visible infirmities. He paused, glancing at his notes. Special terms apply to this lot. All interested bidders must consult with Manager Talbot before participating. A murmur ran through the crowd. In 20 years of attending sales, Yancey had never heard such an announcement. 3 men left their positions near the front and walked to the manager's office, a small room adjacent to the main floor. They returned within minutes, 2 shaking their heads, the 3rd looking pale. None resumed their positions near the platform. The 3rd man caught Yancey's eye as he passed and said quietly, "Don't do it, Thomas. Whatever price they name, it's not worth it." Yancey watched him leave, then turned his attention back to the platform. The enslaved man hadn't moved, hadn't reacted to the murmurs, the bidders walking away, to anything around him. That stillness drew Yancey forward. He had spent his life around enslaved men and women, had seen every form of resistance and accommodation. This was different. He made his way to Manager Talbot's office. 3 other men waited ahead of him. He listened as Talbot gave each the same speech in low, urgent tones. 2 left immediately. The 3rd, a planter Yancey knew slightly from Christ Church Parish, stayed to ask questions. "But what exactly did he do?" the planter pressed. "You're telling me 3 owners died, but you won't say how." Talbot, a thin man in his 50s whose family had run Ryan's Mart for 3 generations, spread his hands helplessly. "The documentation is incomplete. What I can say is we acquired him from an estate sale in Virginia. The estate executor insisted on special terms. He said, anyone who buys this man needs to understand there are circumstances that can't be fully explained." "That's not an answer," the planter said. "It's the only answer I can give you," Talbot replied. "If you're not comfortable with uncertainty, then this lot isn't for you." The planter left. Yancey stepped forward. "Tell me everything you know," he said. Talbot studied him a long moment, then pulled out a folder. Inside were 3 documents, a bill of sale from 1838, another from 1840, and a letter written on expensive paper in a lawyer's precise hand. His first documented owner was Harrison Kemp, a tobacco planter in Prince Edward County, Virginia. Kemp bought him at a Richmond auction in 1838. 14 months later, Kemp was found dead in his tobacco barn. Heart failure, according to the examining physician. Talbot tapped the document. The interesting part is what happened the 3 days before Kemp died. Kemp's overseer reported that Kemp became convinced the enslaved people were plotting against him. He conducted interrogations, increased punishments, disrupted work schedules, searching for conspiracy evidence. On the 3rd day of this behavior, he was found dead. No marks, no sign of struggle, just dead at 43, with a perfectly healthy heart according to prior examinations. Yancey waited. The men were discussing was one Kemp interrogated most intensely. The overseer noted this particular man answered every question calmly, never showed fear or anger, and the morning after each session, Kemp seemed more agitated, more convinced of conspiracy, more certain of threats. The overseer said it was like watching Kemp argue with his own thoughts. "And you believe there's a connection?" Yancey asked. "I'm telling you what's documented," Talbot said carefully. Kemp's estate sold his slaves to settle debts. This man went to a planter named Virgil Stowe in Halifax County. Stowe lasted 11 months. He took his own life, hanged in his study. His family found letters he'd written days before his death, pages describing inescapable dreams, certainties of disasters that never materialized, absolute convictions about threats from people who'd never threatened him. The room felt smaller suddenly. Yancey realized his hands had tightened on Talbot's desk. Stowe's overseer noted the same pattern Kemp's had. In the weeks before Stowe's death, he'd focused particular attention on this man, interrogations, isolation, special surveillance, and the more attention Stowe paid, the worse Stowe became. The man's wife said her husband stopped sleeping, stopped eating properly, spent hours staring at nothing, talking to himself about senseless dangers. And the 3rd owner? Yancey's voice came out rougher than intended. A Richmond merchant named Dobbins, who bought him at Stowe's estate sale intending to resell at a profit. Dobbins owned him 6 weeks before dying of what the physician called a stroke. Dobbins was 37. No prior health concerns. Days before his death, his partners noted erratic behavior, unfounded accusations, paranoid decisions, conversations that seemed to continue discussions no one else had heard. Talbot closed the folder. Dobbins's executor refused to keep him, sent him straight to us with explicit instructions that buyers be warned. He wrote this. Talbot showed Yancey the letter. The handwriting was educated, controlled, but the final paragraph was underlined 3 times. I cannot and will not claim this man caused these deaths. I can only state what happened. 3 owners, 3 deaths, 3 periods of escalating paranoia and fear preceding each death. If this is coincidence, it is the darkest coincidence I have witnessed in 20 years of legal practice. Yancey read the letter twice. Outside, he could hear the auctioneer moving through remaining lots, his voice rising and falling in practiced rhythms. When he looked up, Talbot was watching him with an expression that might have been concern or something else entirely. "You're still interested," Talbot said. It wasn't a question. "I want to know what you think," Yancey said. "Off the record, do you believe there's something to this?" Talbot was quiet a long moment. Then he said, "I believe 3 men died. I believe there's documentation of strange behavior before each death. I believe that man out there," he gestured toward the auction floor, "hasn't shown a single emotion since he arrived. Not fear, not hope, not anger, nothing. In 30 years working these auctions, I've never seen that. Everyone shows something. But do you believe he's dangerous? I believe you should think very carefully about what you're willing to risk to find out." Yancey returned to the auction floor as the auctioneer prepared to close lot 18 without bids. The enslaved man still stood in the same position, expression unchanged, eyes fixed on that point above the crowd. Yancey raised his hand. $500, he said. The auctioneer's relief was palpable. "We have 500. Do I hear 550? Silence. Every head turned to look at Yancey. He recognized the expressions, some pitying, some curious, some satisfied someone else was taking the risk. 500 going once, 500 going twice. The gavel came down. Sold to Mr. Thomas Yancey of Belmont Plantation for $500. The transaction took less than an hour. Yancey signed the purchase documents, including a separate acknowledgement he'd been informed of special circumstances. Manager Talbot insisted on one final conversation before releasing the men. "His name, as far as we know, is Isaac," Talbot said. "He answers to it, follows instructions without resistance. According to overseers who handled him in Virginia, he's an excellent worker, never lazy, never defiant, never causes trouble. If you didn't know his history, you'd think you'd found the perfect purchase." "But I do know his history," Yancey said. "Yes," Talbot agreed. "And that's why I'm telling you this directly. If anything strange begins to happen, if you start feeling or thinking things that seem out of character, document it. Write it down. Share it with someone you trust." The pattern with previous owners was they kept concerns to themselves until those concerns became certainties, and by then it was too late for outside perspective to help. Yancey thanked him and arranged transport. 2 hours later, Isaac arrived at Belmont Plantation in a wagon, still shackled, still showing no emotion. Belmont sprawled across 4,000 acres of low-country landscape, rice fields stretching in geometric precision toward the Cooper River, bordered by pines and cypress. The plantation supported 67 enslaved workers housed in 2 cabin rows behind the main house. Yancey employed an overseer named Curtis Beale, a methodical man from Georgia who ran operations with strict routine and minimal violence. Yancey believed efficiency came from consistency, not terror, and his approach had proven profitable. He assigned Isaac to the North Field crew under driver Marcus, who'd worked at Belmont 15 years. Marcus had authority to organize work details and maintain order. Yancey trusted his judgment. "Just watch him," Yancey told Marcus that first evening. "I want to know everything, how he works, how he interacts, what he does when he thinks no one's paying attention." Marcus studied Isaac, who stood nearby awaiting assignment. "What am I watching for, exactly? Anything unusual?" "Mr. Yancey, forgive me, but that's not much help." Yancey couldn't argue. "Just pay close attention. Report anything that seems worth reporting." The first week passed uneventfully. Marcus reported Isaac worked harder than most, never complained, followed every instruction immediately. He kept to himself during evening hours, speaking only when spoken to, eating rations alone while others gathered socially. This isolation concerned Marcus more than defiance would have. "A man that quiet is either broken completely or thinking thoughts he doesn't want seen," Marcus said. "I don't think Isaac's broken." "What makes you say that?" "Broken men look through you." Isaac looks at you, sees you, just doesn't react. By the second week, Yancey noticed he was thinking about Isaac more than any single enslaved person should occupy an owner's attention. He found himself watching the north fields from his study window, trying to pick out Isaac's figure. He lay awake some nights wondering what thoughts moved behind that expressionless face. The wondering irritated him. He had a plantation to run, business to maintain, obligations to fulfill. One man, even with unusual history, shouldn't command this much mental space. But he couldn't stop. The third week brought the first incident. Marcus reported 2 field hands had fought over food rations. Overseer Beale separated them and assigned punishment. Nothing unusual except one detail Marcus mentioned almost as an afterthought. Both men claimed Isaac had been watching them days before the fight, just watching with that blank expression, and it had gotten under their skin, made them jumpy. They're blaming him for their own poor discipline, Beale said when Yancey asked. Men will blame anyone rather than take responsibility. Maybe, Yancey said. But let's move Isaac to a different crew. Put him with the river team in the South Fields. The transfer happened next day. Yancey told himself this would prove things one way or another, either problems would follow Isaac or they wouldn't. They followed. The river team supervisor reported tension within the group, nothing specific, just an atmosphere of unease that hadn't existed before. Workers snapped at each other over minor issues, routines disrupted by unexplained anxiety. When pressed, the supervisor admitted several had complained about Isaac's silence, his lack of reaction. It made them nervous, they said. Made them feel watched even when they weren't. Superstitious nonsense, Beale declared. These people worked themselves up over nothing. But Yancey remembered Talbot's warning. If you start feeling or thinking things that seem out of character, document it. He began keeping a journal, noting every incident, every complaint, every moment Isaac's presence seemed to correlate with disruption. The 4th week ended with Yancey's first nightmare. He dreamed he stood in his rice fields at dawn, watching workers move through routines. Everything appeared normal until he realized none were actually working, they were pantomiming labor while their eyes stayed fixed on something behind him. He turned and saw Isaac standing at the field's edge, perfectly still, watching him with that blank expression. Suddenly Yancey understood everything was wrong, that his entire life had been leading to this moment, that danger surrounded him from every direction though he couldn't name its form. He woke gasping, heart hammering, dawnlight creeping through his windows. The dream faded, leaving only residual unease. By breakfast, he dismissed it as stress and poor sleep. But that night brought another dream. And the night after, another. A month after purchasing Isaac, Thomas Yancey found himself at his study window at 3 a.m., unable to sleep, watching the slave quarters and wondering what was happening to him. The dreams had become nightly. During the day, he caught himself losing focus in conversations, his mind drifting to vague worries he couldn't articulate. His wife commented he seemed distracted. His overseer asked if he was feeling well. And through it all, Isaac worked in the fields, silent and expressionless, causing no direct problems while somehow being present in every problem that arose. Just when we thought we'd seen it all, the horror intensifies. If this story is giving you chills, share this video with a friend who loves dark mysteries. Hit that like button to support our content, and don't forget to subscribe to never miss stories like this. Let's discover together what happens next. Yancey's journal entries from April and May 1843 reveal a man trying desperately to maintain rational perspective while watching his own thoughts become increasingly unreliable. Entries started brief and factual. April 12, Isaac continues steady work. No complaints from supervisors. Workers report continued unease in his presence. Cannot determine if genuine concern or social contagion. By late April, entries changed. April 28. Another night of dreams. Cannot clearly recall upon waking. Certainty of threat without source. Wife asked 3 times during breakfast if I was feeling well. Told her yes but noticed my hand shaking while holding coffee cup. Spent morning going through account books. Found myself reading same page repeatedly without comprehension. Went to fields to observe. When I saw Isaac felt immediate sense he was waiting for something. What? Cannot say but certainty was absolute. The change in Yancey's behavior didn't go unnoticed. Curtis Beale mentioned it to Marcus one evening in early May. Beale said Mr. Yancey had ridden out to the south fields 3 times that day, always positioning himself to watch Isaac work. Each time he'd stayed about 10 minutes, saying nothing, just watching, then ridden back without explanation. "Man's torturing himself over something," Beale said. "And I think we both know what." Marcus didn't respond directly. Instead he said, "You notice anything different about Isaac since he got here?" "Not a damn thing. He works, he eats, he sleeps, doesn't cause trouble, doesn't make friends, just exists." "Exactly," Marcus said. "In 2 months, I haven't seen him smile, frown, get angry, show fear, nothing. You ever known anyone who shows nothing? Some folks are quiet. Quiet isn't the same as empty." "I've been watching him close," like Mr. Yancey asked. "It's like looking at someone who's only partly here. The body works, the mind works, but something else is missing." Beale shifted uncomfortably. "You saying there's something unnatural about him?" "I'm saying I don't know what I'm saying, but I know Mr. Yancey's changing, getting more worried, more focused on Isaac specifically. And I remember what Mr. Yancey told me when Isaac first arrived, watch for anything unusual. Well, I'm watching. And what I see is Mr. Yancey turning into someone different." That conversation happened May 8th. On May 10th, Yancey called his overseer and lead driver to his study and announced he was selling Isaac. "I've made inquiries. A trader in Savannah handles difficult cases. He's agreed to take him for $300. Beale and Marcus exchanged glances, a significant loss on the $500 paid 2 months earlier. "Might I ask why, sir?" Beale said carefully. "Because he's disrupting plantation operations." "With respect, sir, he hasn't disrupted anything directly. The work gets done. Harvest projections remain on schedule." "He's disrupting operations," Yancey repeated, voice sharper than Beale had ever heard. "I'm not asking your opinion. I'm informing you it's been made. The trader arrives next week." After Beale left, Marcus remained. Yancey looked at him with exhausted eyes. "You think I'm making a mistake?" "I think you're afraid, Mr. Yancey. And in all the years I've known you, I've never seen you afraid of anything." "Then you're seeing it now." Yancey stood and walked to the window. Fields stretched green and productive under spring sunshine. Everything looked as it should. "I can't explain what's happening to me, Marcus. I lie awake convinced something terrible is about to occur. I see threats in every shadow, danger in every routine moment. I find myself suspicious of my own wife, my own overseer, people I've trusted for years. And the only common element, the only thing that's changed, is him." "Maybe that's the point," Marcus said quietly. Yancey turned. "What do you mean?" "Maybe the threat isn't what he does. Maybe it's what we do to ourselves when we're afraid of what he might do." The observation struck Yancey silent. He stood at the window a long moment, then said, "Get out, Marcus." "Sir, I didn't mean, get out." Marcus left. Yancey remained at the window until long after dark, watching the slave quarters, watching for movement that never came, imagining 1,000 scenarios that made perfect sense in his frightened mind and no sense in the rational corner still functioning. The Savannah trader arrived May 17th. His name was Rufus Tate, and he specialized in what he called specialty acquisitions, enslaved people with complications making them difficult to sell through normal channels. He examined Isaac thoroughly, checked teeth and muscle tone, asked about work history and behavior. Through all this, Isaac stood with his usual blank expression, answering when spoken to, showing nothing. "Seems like good stock to me," Tate said. "Why exactly are you selling at a loss?" Yancey had prepared an answer. "He's causing social disruption among my other workers. Nothing I can prove in court, but enough I'd rather cut losses than deal with continued problems." Tate studied him, then glanced at Isaac, then back at Yancey. "You sure that's all it is?" "I deal with desperate men all the time, Mr. Yancey, men who need to unload slaves for reasons they can't quite explain." "You've got that same look, like you're not just selling him, you're trying to get rid of something that scares you." $300, Yancey said. "Take him or leave him." Tate took him. The transaction completed within the hour. Yancey watched from his study as Tate loaded Isaac into his wagon. The men moved with the same calm compliance he'd shown every day at Belmont. No resistance, no emotion, no acknowledgement his circumstances had changed again. The wagon rolled down the plantation road and disappeared into pines. Yancey felt relief so intense it made him dizzy. That night, for the first time in weeks, he slept without nightmares. The relief lasted 3 days. On the 4th, Yancey received a letter from Savannah, delivered by a private courier who departed immediately without waiting for response. The letter was from Rufus Tate, but the handwriting was barely recognizable as the confident script he'd used signing Isaac's bill of sale. Mr. Yancey. I am returning Isaac to you at no charge. I cannot keep him. I will not keep him. What follows is an account of the last 3 days, written as clearly as my shaking hands allow. I left your plantation believing I'd acquired a prime slave at an excellent price. My intention was to hold him a few weeks, let any difficulties surface, then resell at profit in Savannah market. I placed him in temporary quarters with 3 other acquisitions, all men similar age and condition. The first night, I woke at 2 a.m. convinced someone had broken into my house. I searched every room, found nothing, couldn't shake certainty of intrusion. I stood in my hallway an hour, listening to creaks that are always there but suddenly sounded like footsteps. I knew I was irrational, knew my house was secure, but certainty of danger wouldn't release me. The second night, I didn't sleep at all. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw scenarios of disaster, fire, flood, financial ruin, attacks from people who'd never threatened me. I got up and walked my property, checking locks, examining shadows, finding nothing wrong but unable to convince myself everything was safe. This morning, I went to the quarters. The other 3 men were huddled in one corner, as far from Isaac as space allowed. They said he'd been staring at the wall all night, not sleeping, just standing there staring at nothing. They said it was like being locked in a room with something that only looked human. I spoke to Isaac, asked if he was well. He turned those empty eyes on me and said, "Yes, sir, I'm well." And in that moment, I understood what you were afraid of, Mr. Yancey. It's not what he does. It's what happens to us when we try to understand what he is. I am sending him back. My men will deliver him to your gate. I don't want payment. Don't want anything except to never see him again. Do what you will with him. But for the love of God, don't sell him to anyone you care about. Whatever is wrong with this man, it spreads like disease, and I will not be responsible for passing it to another human being. Yours in desperation, Rufus Tate. Yancey read the letter 3 times, hands trembling by the end. He walked to his window and saw, already visible on the road, a wagon approaching from the south. Even at this distance, he could see the driver moving horses faster than advisable. Could see someone sitting motionless in the wagon bed. Isaac was coming back. Curtis Beale found Yancey still at the window when the wagon arrived. "Sir, there's a situation. The Savannah trader has returned Isaac. He's refusing payment. Says he can't keep him." "What should I, put him in the isolation shed?" Yancey said, voice flat. "Lock him in. No contact with other workers. I need time to think." "Sir, with respect, the isolation shed is for punishment. Isaac hasn't actually done anything. Do it." The isolation shed was a small building 50 yards from the main slave quarters, used occasionally when someone required separation. It had a dirt floor, no windows, a door locking from outside. Water and basic rations were provided twice daily. No one stayed there long, it was too close to torture for Yancey's usual style. Isaac was locked inside. He went without resistance, as he did everything. Marcus supervised and reported Isaac showed no emotion, no concern, no reaction. "It's like locking up furniture," Marcus said. "I don't think he cares where he is or what happens." That night, Yancey sat in his study with Tate's letter before him and his journal open to a blank page. He needed to think clearly, document with precision rather than panic. He began writing. May 23, 1843. I have owned Isaac 73 days. In that time, 3 separate people have reported severe anxiety and paranoid thoughts in his presence, myself, my lead driver Marcus, and now Rufus Tate, an experienced trader. The pattern is consistent. Proximity to Isaac correlates with increasing fear, disrupted sleep, obsessive thoughts about threats that cannot be rationally justified. The question, is this man causing these effects, or are we causing them in ourselves because of knowledge of his history? Evidence for causation: 3 previous owners died. Multiple supervisors report same psychological patterns. Effects begin only after acquisition and end only after separation. Evidence against causation: Isaac has never threatened anyone, never acted violently, never done anything except work as instructed. Every problem has occurred in minds of observers, not objective reality. If we were ignorant of his history, would we notice anything unusual? But we are not ignorant, and that knowledge changes everything. Current state: Isaac locked in isolation. I feel relief at his confinement, which itself troubles me. What am I afraid of? A man who stands silently. A worker who follows every instruction. Or am I afraid of my own thoughts, the ones that suggest impossible dangers and unavoidable disasters? I cannot sell him again. That's clear. No trader will accept him after Tate's experience. I cannot keep him in isolation indefinitely, inhumane and impractical. I cannot integrate him back because his presence causes psychological disruption, whether his fault or ours. What options remain? Yancey stopped writing. His hand had begun shaking again. Outside, night had fallen completely. The plantation was quiet: insects, distant animal calls, wind in pines. Everything was as it should be. Everything was perfectly safe. So why did he feel like a man awaiting execution? The answer came 3 days later, not from rational deliberation but from a conversation he overheard between Curtis Beale and a field hand named Samuel, a man who'd worked at Belmont since Yancey's father owned the place. They stood near the main house, unaware Yancey could hear through an open window. Samuel spoke with careful authority of age and experience. You want to know what I think? I think that man in the shed is showing y'all what you already are. Masters spend every day afraid of us. Afraid we'll rebel, run, poison your food, burn your houses, kill you in your sleep. You live in fear and call it caution. You live in suspicion and call it wisdom. Then along comes someone who doesn't do nothing, doesn't threaten nothing, just exists in his own silence. And suddenly you can't handle it because he makes you see your own fear. Makes you recognize what you've been feeling all along. That's foolish talk, Beale said, but his voice lacked conviction. Is it? Mr. Yancey's a good master as masters go. Fair, controlled, thinks things through. But he bought Isaac knowing something was wrong. And now he can't stop thinking about what might happen. Not what is happening, what might happen. That's not Isaac's doing. That's Mr. Yancey doing it to himself. Yancey stood frozen at the window, feeling the words settle into understanding like stones dropped into still water. The ripples spread, touching everything he'd experienced, feared, documented. Samuel was right. The insight arrived with devastating clarity. Isaac hadn't threatened him. Isaac had never threatened anyone. He'd simply existed with perfect silence, perfect compliance, perfect emptiness. And in that void, every observer had poured their own fears. The isolation, the blank expression, the lack of emotional response, these things hadn't caused paranoia. They'd been mirrors reflecting back paranoia that already existed in every plantation owner's mind. Harrison Kemp had convinced himself of slave conspiracies and interrogated Isaac until his own imagination killed him. Virgil Stowe had dreamed disasters until he hanged himself. The merchant Dobbins had destroyed himself with baseless suspicions. And now Yancey was following the same path, building elaborate fears around a man who'd done nothing except be incomprehensibly silent. The realization should have brought relief. Understanding should have freed him. But instead, Yancey felt something darker settle into his chest. Because if Samuel was right, if Isaac was just a mirror, then what did it mean that 3 men had died looking into it? What did it reveal about slavery itself? About the psychology of ownership, the fear undergirding every moment of plantation life? He descended the stairs and walked outside, finding Samuel and Beale still conversing. Both startled when they saw him approach. Beale's face paled as he realized his employer might have overheard. Samuel, Yancey said, voice steady despite turmoil. You've been at Belmont longer than I've owned it. You knew my father. You've seen 3 generations. Tell me honestly, have you ever seen anyone like Isaac before? Samuel hesitated, glancing at Beale, who gave a small nod of permission. Not exactly like him, no sir. But I've seen men go quiet in different ways. Some break under weight and go silent because there's nothing left to say. Others hold silence like a weapon, refusing to give masters what they want. Isaac's different, though. He's not broken and he's not fighting. He's just absent, like he removed himself from the whole situation. And you think that absence is what frightens people? I think people need reactions, Mr. Yancey. Need to see fear or anger or submission, something that confirms the power structure makes sense. Isaac doesn't give that confirmation. He exists outside the whole framework. That's what troubles you. Not that he might do something, but that he won't do anything. Won't participate in the performance everyone else is locked into. Yancey absorbed this, each word landing with uncomfortable accuracy. The men who owned him before me, they all died. How do you explain that if Isaac didn't do anything? Samuel chose words carefully. I can't speak to those men's minds, sir, but I know fear can kill as sure as poison. A man who convinces himself danger is everywhere, who stops sleeping, stops eating right, works himself into constant terror, that man's going to sicken, make mistakes, perhaps take his own life rather than live with fear he can't escape. Maybe Isaac didn't kill them. Maybe they killed themselves trying to solve a problem that didn't exist. The conversation ended there, but it echoed in Yancey's mind through the day and into night. He returned to his study and pulled out his journal, reading months of entries with fresh perspective. Every page confirmed what Samuel described: escalating fear without concrete cause, obsessive focus on potential threats, sleep disrupted by nightmares that dissolved upon waking, certainty of danger without ability to specify its form. He had documented his own descent into paranoia with meticulous precision, never recognizing it for what it was until an enslaved man explained it in terms he couldn't refute. The irony was almost unbearable. He'd feared Isaac's influence while Isaac had done nothing. He'd sought rational explanations for irrational feelings, never acknowledging the irrationality itself was the point. Slavery created fear in everyone it touched, enslaved and enslaver alike. But masters could hide fear behind power, control, authority. Isaac's silence had stripped away those concealments, leaving fear naked and undeniable. And what did it mean that Yancey, despite understanding this, still felt afraid? He walked to his desk, pulled out paper, and began writing. The letter took 3 hours, each sentence crafted and reconsidered. When finished, it read: To the Charleston Constabulary. I am writing to report concerns regarding a slave named Isaac currently held on my property. This man was purchased from Ryan's Mart on March 14, 1843, with documented history of association with deaths of 3 previous owners. Since his arrival at Belmont Plantation, I have experienced severe psychological distress, including persistent anxiety, paranoid thoughts, obsessive fears regarding his presence. These symptoms corroborated by multiple observers. I believe this man represents unique danger to public safety, though I cannot articulate precise nature of the danger. What I can state with certainty is proximity to him creates psychological conditions that may result in self-harm or impaired judgment. I request Constabulary investigate this matter and determine appropriate action. I further state I am of sound mind as I write this, which my reputation and business success can verify. If anyone questions my rationality making this report, I ask they consider, would a man in grip of paranoid delusion invite official scrutiny of his own mental state? I recognize unusual nature of this complaint. I recognize it may sound like ravings of a man who has lost reason. I can only say I have spent 3 months observing and documenting patterns that 3 previous owners also observed before their deaths. Whether Isaac causes these patterns or knowledge of his history creates them, I cannot determine. But patterns exist, they are consistent, and they are dangerous. Yours sincerely, Thomas Yancey, Belmont Plantation, Cooper River, South Carolina. The letter reached Charleston May 28. 3 days later, Deputy Constable James Wilcox arrived at Belmont with instructions to interview relevant parties and submit report. Wilcox was practical, skeptical of dramatic claims but thorough. He spent 2 days at Plantation, speaking with Yancey, Beale, Marcus, several field hands. He examined Isaac through isolation shed's locked door, noting silence and blank expression. He reviewed documentation from Virginia, Tate's letter, Yancey's journal entries, reading each page carefully. On his second evening, Wilcox requested private conversation with Yancey. They sat in study as dusk settled, room growing darker until Yancey lit lamps. "Mr. Yancey," Wilcox began, "I've conducted many investigations. I've seen men lie, exaggerate, create elaborate fictions. I don't believe you're doing any of those things. I believe you're genuinely frightened, and your fear is sincere. But I need to ask directly, and need you answer with complete honesty. Has Isaac ever threatened you? Has he ever made any gesture, spoken any word, done anything whatsoever a reasonable person would interpret as dangerous?" Yancey opened his mouth, then closed it. He sat silent a long moment before saying, "No, he has not." "Has he shirked work, caused problems with other slaves, attempted escape, or engaged in any behavior justifying punishment or special scrutiny?" "No." "Then what exactly are you afraid of?" The question hung in air between them. Yancey struggled to articulate something he'd never successfully put into words. "I'm afraid of what I become when he's near. I'm afraid of thoughts that seem so certain and so baseless simultaneously. I'm afraid I'm following same path as 3 men who died, and I don't know how to step off that path." Wilcox nodded slowly. "I spoke with your man Samuel this morning. He said something interesting. He said Isaac's only crime is refusing to play role slavery demands. That his silence makes whole system visible in ways it usually isn't, and that visibility is what frightens masters. Do you think there's truth in that observation?" "I think," Yancey said carefully, "that Samuel is wiser than I've given him credit for. Then perhaps solution isn't legal action against Isaac. Perhaps it's something else entirely." Wilcox's report, preserved in Charleston court records, makes fascinating reading. "I have completed investigation into concerns raised by Mr. Thomas Yancey regarding slave known as Isaac. Findings as follows. Documented facts not in dispute. 3 previous owners died under unusual circumstances. Multiple observers report psychological distress in Isaac's presence. Slave himself shows no normal emotional responses, maintains constant silence except when directly addressed. However, I find no evidence Isaac has committed any crime or violated statute. He has not threatened violence, engaged in rebellion, attempted escape, or acted in any way justifying legal action. Deaths of previous owners, while troubling in coincidence, were ruled natural or self-inflicted by local authorities and do not implicate Isaac criminally. Regarding psychological effects reported, I cannot determine whether caused by Isaac or by knowledge of his history creating self-fulfilling prophecy. What I can state, Mr. Yancey appears genuinely distressed, his fears, while possibly irrational, sincerely held. I observed Isaac personally approximately 1 hour, speaking with him, watching demeanor. He is polite, responsive to questions, shows no signs mental deficiency or dangerous inclination. His silence and lack emotional expression unusual, but not illegal. If anything, behavior suggests someone withdrawn from engagement rather than planning harm. My recommendation, Charleston Constabulary take no action regarding Isaac himself as no crime committed. However, I suggest Mr. Yancey consider transferring Isaac to state custody for assignment public works projects where close oversight by single owner not required. This would remove problematic dynamic while not punishing Isaac for circumstances beyond control. Broader question raised by case, whether men can be dangerous through no action own, merely by reflecting fears of those who own him, is philosophical rather than legal, outside my purview. I leave it wiser men determine what it means when slave's greatest threat is his silence. Wilcox delivered report personally, sitting in Yancey's study as plantation owner read it twice. When Yancey looked up, his face had aged 10 years. "So you're saying there's nothing to be done?" "I'm saying law can't help you with this, Mr. Yancey. This isn't legal problem. It's human problem. What's the difference?" Wilcox stood to leave. At door, he paused. "You could free him. Just draw up papers and be done with it. Free him so he can do this to someone else. Or maybe so you can stop doing it to yourself." Wilcox touched hat brim. "Good day, Mr. Yancey. I hope you find peace you're looking for." Thomas Yancey sat in study long after Wilcox departed, deputy's words echoing. Free him. Suggestion seemed absurd. Slaves weren't freed because they made owners uncomfortable. Manumission required compelling reasons, exceptional service, debt repayment, genuine affection built over decades. Not fear. Never fear. But Yancey had spent 3 months watching his mind betray him, documented every slide into paranoia, recognized patterns Samuel described. He'd seen himself becoming same kind of men who'd owned Isaac before, obsessive, anxious, controlled by fears he couldn't name. And he understood finally Isaac was not cause. Isaac was catalyst, blank surface revealing what already existed underneath. Insight brought no comfort. Because if Isaac was just mirror, then what Yancey saw reflected was fundamental truth of his entire life, that he lived in constant fear of people he enslaved, that every interaction colored by awareness potential rebellion, that whole system depended on maintaining control through force, surveillance, certainty punishment. He'd never articulated this fear before because it was so constant, invisible like breathing, like gravity, just way things were. Isaac had made it visible. And once visible, it couldn't be unseen. That night, Yancey walked to isolation shed first time since Isaac confined there. He stood outside locked door several minutes, listening to silence within, gathering courage for what he knew needed doing. Finally, he unlocked door and stepped inside. Isaac sat against far wall, posture suggesting he'd been exact position hours. When Yancey's lantern light fell across his face, he looked up with same blank expression, same empty eyes that troubled so many. Isaac, Yancey said, voice unsteady. I need understand something. Men who owned you before me, they all died. Trader who tried resell you couldn't bear keep you even for profit. Now I'm standing here having spent 3 months descending into fears I can't rationally justify. Did you do something to us? Is there something you're doing I can't see? Isaac's expression didn't change. He sat silent long moment, and Yancey thought he might not answer. Then, in flat tone carrying no emotion, Isaac said, I worked for Mr. Kemp. I answered questions. Followed instructions. When he died, I sold. I worked for Mr. Stowe. Answered questions. Followed instructions. When he died, I sold. I worked for Mr. Dobbins. When he died, I sold. I work for you. Answer questions. Follow instructions. This all I done, sir. But you see pattern, Yancey pressed. See, everyone who owns you becomes frightened, becomes paranoid, sometimes dies. You must see that. I see men who own other men often frightened, Isaac said. I see some cannot live with what frightens them. What causes fear? I cannot say. I only know not caused by anything I do because I do nothing except told. Then what are you? Why different other slaves? For first time since Yancey known him, something flickered across Isaac's face, not quite emotion, but ghost of something once emotion, worn away by years. I stopped pretending, sir, Isaac said quietly. Stopped performing role masters want. Stopped showing fear make them feel powerful. Stopped showing gratitude make them feel generous. Stopped showing hope make them feel merciful. Stopped all it. I just work exist. Nothing more. Apparently, that most dangerous thing slave can do. Words struck Yancey like physical blows. He gripped lantern tighter, light wavering across shed walls. You saying this deliberate? Choosing be this way. Choosing be honest, sir. Stop lying with face and voice about what this life is. If honesty frightens people, perhaps because they need life feel comfortable with truth. Yancey stood frozen, recognizing in that moment exactly what Samuel described. Isaac hadn't done anything to him or previous owners. He'd simply refused perform emotional labor that made slavery bearable for masters, constant reassurance system natural, inevitable, perhaps beneficial. Without that performance, masters faced raw reality, owning human beings with no choice but comply, building wealth on forced labor, living every day with people every reason hate them. That reality unbearable. 3 men died rather than face it. Yancey standing same precipice. He left shed without another word, locked door behind him, walked back main house through darkness feeling suddenly oppressive. His wife already asleep. He sat study with bottle whiskey and journal, trying find words for what now understood, knowing some truths resist articulation. Next morning, June 8, 1843, Thomas Yancey summoned lawyer to Belmont, instructed draw up manumission papers for Isaac. Lawyer, Charleston man named Haywood handling Yancey family legal matters 2 decades, surprised. May ask reason unusual decision. Haywood inquired. You may ask, Yancey said, but doubt understand answer. Let's simply say keeping men enslaved proven more costly than freeing him. Paperwork took 3 days. Manumission, South Carolina required documentation, justification, registration local authorities. Yancey provided statement claiming Isaac rendered exceptional service, freedom earned exemplary conduct, both technically false but satisfied legal requirements. June 11, Yancey signed papers providing Isaac $20 and documentation-free status. Manumission recorded Charleston courthouse same day. Under South Carolina law, Isaac had 90 days leave state or face re-enslavement. Yancey released him isolation shed personally, handing papers and money without ceremony. Isaac emerged after 3 weeks confinement, looking exactly same, clean, healthy, expression blank, eyes revealing nothing. You're free, Yancey said. Understand what means? Yes, sir, Isaac said, voice as always carrying no emotion. I don't know what you are, Yancey continued, needing say it though knowing get no meaningful response. Don't know if did something me and others or we did ourselves, but can't live not knowing, so ending only way can. Isaac studied him empty eyes. Long moment, Yancey thought might finally see reaction, flicker triumph, satisfaction, even simple recognition. But Isaac's face remained blank. When spoke, same flat tone always used, thank you freedom, sir. May ask one question before leave. Yancey nodded, surprised request. You think sleep better now? Question cut deeper than any accusation could have. Yancey had no answer. Isaac seemed expect none. He turned walked down Plantation Road, manumission papers folded carefully one hand, $20 other. Yancey watched study window until Isaac disappeared into pines, free men walking south toward Charleston, whatever life awaited beyond 90 days. Nightmare stopped that night. Obsessive thoughts faded following week. Within month, Yancey felt almost himself again, though something fundamental shifted. He ran Plantation same efficiency before, but found himself questioning things never questioned. Why certain slaves avoided gaze? What thoughts moved behind careful expressions? How much fear carry every day? And how much fear shaped everything about world inhabited? Curtis Beale noticed change, mentioned Marcus evening reviewing next day's assignments. Mr. Yancey different since business Isaac. Quieter, asks more questions, actually listens answers. Yesterday asked me think workers content. Didn't know what tell him. Marcus, who watched entire situation unfold careful attention, nodded slowly. Maybe point. Maybe Isaac wasn't dangerous all. Maybe just first completely honest thing any us ever seen this place. No performance, no accommodation, no careful navigation power dynamics, just silence. And we couldn't handle because made see everything else pretending not notice. That heavy thought, Beale said. Heavy truth, Marcus replied. Mr. Yancey saw truth, nearly killed him like killed others. Difference found way step back. Freeing Isaac like closing book couldn't bear keep reading. You think Isaac planned all this? New effect silence have. I think Isaac survived only way could, removing himself whole performance. Whether knew what do owners, can't say. But know this, 3 men dead. 1 man nearly joined them. And all because couldn't handle slave refused pretend. That tells something system, doesn't it? Records show Isaac appeared Charleston June 15 presenting manumission papers Port Authority. Purchased passage ship bound Boston, 1 few cities free blacks live relative safety. Crew manifest lists Isaac Freedman, age approximate 28, destination Massachusetts. That last definitive documentation existence. But other records scattered unverified suggest story didn't end Boston. 1847, Charleston newspaper published brief article Free black man Philadelphia accused causing psychological distress employer though no charges filed. Article noted man's disturbing silence refusal display normal emotional responses created atmosphere unease household where worked. Employer dismissed without cause providing extra wages ensure departure. 1851, letter published The Liberator, abolitionist newspaper, described freedman New York whose profound silence impenetrable demeanor troubled those around though committed no wrong performed all tasks precision. Letter author, white abolitionist, wrote, this man's crime appears refusal reassure us with manner. He works silently, lives privately, offers nothing himself beyond labor. We claim want free black citizens, but when faced one who will not perform gratitude or accommodation, find ourselves uncomfortable. Perhaps discomfort reveals more our limitations than his character. 1856, diary kept Quaker merchant Philadelphia mentioned employing men enslaved Virginia who spoke rarely worked extraordinary consistency. Diary entry noted, he told once freedom meant space between others fear what actually exists. Did not fully comprehend meaning time, but reflecting upon now, believe describing terrible gap between perception reality slavery creates all minds touches. None accounts definitively connected Isaac. Name common among freed men, descriptions fit many navigating complex social landscape antebellum America. But suggest pattern, men moving free society, carrying same mirror carried through slavery, showing people own fears, prejudices, desperate need control couldn't understand. And perhaps freedom, finding spaces where silence simply silence rather threat. Thomas Yancey lived until 1869, managing Belmont through Civil War Reconstruction. War brought disruptions, Union blockades, Confederate conscription laborers, eventual emancipation everyone once owned. Yancey adapted as many planters did, transitioning sharecropping wage labor though heart never truly rebuilding process. Later journals, preserved descendants eventually donated South Carolina Historical Society, showmen grappling morality slavery ways few planters did period. Wrote extensively fear, control, psychological costs ownership. Entry 1862, as Confederate armies struggled Union forces certainty slavery's permanence began crumble, reflected experience Isaac, I spent 19 years trying understand what happened spring 1843. No closer answers. What no, freed one man and doing saw clearly first time prison built myself. Every person enslaved wait conscience. But Isaac one whose silence made feel wait fully. Not through accusation rebellion, but through simple existence unmarked performances demanded enslaved people. Think now Isaac's danger refusal pretend. Would not smile when wanted comfort, would not show fear when wanted compliance, would not perform role slavery demanded. And refusal revealed terror heart system, depends entirely performance both sides maintaining illusion naturalness. Remove performance, show raw reality power without accommodation, whole structure becomes visible cruelty. 3 men died looking truth. Nearly became fourth. Wonder how many others encountered Isaac freedom faced same mirror. Wonder anyone ever learned look without fear. As right, whole society dying. War revealed what Isaac revealed 20 years ago, system built cannot sustain once people stop performing assigned roles. Enslaved people walking away plantations, refusing work, demanding wages freedom. Confederacy calls rebellion, call honesty. Stop pretending, just Isaac stopped pretending, and without pretense, whole edifice collapses. Freed Isaac save myself. Now whole South must free everyone save whatever remains civilization. Suspect resist truth long possible, just resisted until no choice. Suspect resistance cost everything, just nearly cost life. Isolation shed where Isaac spent final weeks Belmont still stands, now part preserved historic site operated National Park Service. Visitors walk through, see bare dirt floor windowless walls, imagine meant locked darkness weak simply because silence frightened people. Tour guides tell sanitized version story, talk unusual slave troubled masters without exploring trouble actually meant. Mention fear Isaac generated, 3 deaths association ownership, eventual manumission, but frame curious historical footnote rather indictment slavery psychological machinery. But question remains same question haunted Yancey until death, was Isaac dangerous? Or simply show people danger already carried within selves? Did cause 3 deaths nearly fourth? Or merely reflect fear paranoia slavery created everyone touched? Was silence weapon? Or simply honesty system built lies? Charleston constabulary never answered. Neither courts, newspapers, historians later studied case. Maybe no answer. Maybe point. Maybe Isaac's greatest act asking question couldn't be answered without admitting truths antebellum society couldn't afford acknowledge, that slavery made monsters masters, that fear foundation whole system, that performances enslaved people forced give only things preventing owners seeing themselves clearly. This mystery shows sometimes most dangerous person room 1 refuses pretend everything normal. What think story? Believe Isaac caused fears encountered? Or people simply confronting own darkness? Leave comment below. If enjoyed tale want more historical mysteries reveal uncomfortable truths, subscribe, hit notification bell, share someone loves stories make question think no. See next video.